Supporting your local news, Airpark Canterbury, Logistics Drive and Parking Island off Rustley Road.
And joining me now is Superintendent Lane Todds. Hello to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you, sir. Can you explain exactly what occurred last night across Christchurch?
We're getting to the bottom of it, but essentially we've had a lot of offending with vehicles, alleged assaults, and also some volume crime and property offending as well. So we are closing in. We have identified who we think are the offenders. They are youths, and we're still just piecing the evidence together, but certainly closing in quite quickly now. We're also cross-referencing with recent offending we've had. You'll recall we had a spate about 6 weeks ago with some serious youth offending, so we're just also looking if there's any connections with those offenders.
Superintendent, what are the age of these youths that you're looking at as suspects?
Some of them appear to be under 14, which obviously still remains a concern for us when they're that young, allegedly committing these offences, and up to about 17 years old.
You've got these young offenders allegedly attempting to run over multiple people. I mean, this happens in other countries, and there's a definition for that. Does that concern you, this level of violence that's happening in this city?
It certainly does, and I've been on record saying this before, and I'll say it again. I'm very concerned that this is going to end in a death, and I think that's what we've got to keep front of mind. So, whilst the youth offenders are committing this sort of offending, it doesn't take much before this can turn into a critical incident where somebody is killed or seriously injured, and that's our greatest concern with this. Hence why we've certainly got a team investigating it as we speak, and I'm confident we are going to apprehend those involved.
Superintendent, I understand there was a pursuit last night that was called off because these youths were driving dangerously, particularly along some parts of Linwood. Is that correct?
Yes, and with pursuits, again, with the alleged age of the offenders, we do have to be very conscious of the high risk when we are actively involved in a pursuit. And so that's why we'll always try and look for other opportunities in terms of apprehension. And, the way they're driving, and you've highlighted some of the allegations against the driving events from last night, if we're actively involved in pursuit, that just makes the risk even higher. So we're definitely active around how we apprehend them, but to be honest, doing a pursuit is totally not the right way to go, and just with the risk involved, not only with the air people, but also the youths themselves, but obviously also the wider community. And so we definitely have to look at other avenues how we can apprehend them.
It must be a really delicate situation, Superintendent, because, some would ask, under what situation would a pursuit be authorised? Arguably using a vehicle as a weapon to allegedly run somebody down and then rob them with a knife. Surely that meets some kind of threshold to use extraordinary powers or measures. What do you say?
Yes, and I guess the contextual around that, we have to be very conscious that we obviously have a pursuit policy, and the criteria is quite stringent around that. But with these, we also obviously have to look at the risk involved. So, i.e., notwithstanding the serious offending that's involved here, but by us pursuing, are we actually going to aggravate that and make that even worse? So those are the factors we have to consider. And look, I accept that sometimes we don't get this right. And but bearing in mind, and hopefully your listeners will understand this, our people are making these high-risk decisions with split seconds to think about it. It's all very well for us to sort of pick this apart 24, 48 hours later, but these, our officers at the front line have to make these decisions at split second. And so with weighing all that up, we definitely have to factor in what's the risk involved by us pursuing, and is there another avenue we can have to apprehend the offenders.
Your officers, your frontline staff do a wonderful job. I want to make that very, very clear tonight. Was a helicopter involved in this operation?
Not last night, no.
Do you think that could have helped And are there active discussions or ongoing discussions about perhaps getting a full-time chopper in this city, given the fact we are seeing this type of crime?
The short answer is there's certainly no conversation happening in the short to medium term around a helicopter being based in Christchurch as in a police helicopter. But that said, we do have contracts with local operators, and from time to time we do use them, and I have authorised that over recent months. But it's on a case-by-case basis, and so yes, that's certainly an option. But again, we have to be conscious, is that going to aggravate the issue or not? So we have to be careful how we do deploy that.
Superintendent, why do police no longer provide descriptions of offenders? And that's not just with youths, but it's across the board.
We have to factor in, the Bill of Rights, breach of privacy. But you will see from time to time, if we're dealing with serious offending that's reported and our investigations take us down the line where we've exhausted as much as we can, but we may have an image or a CCTV coverage that may assist the inquiry in terms of identifying the suspect. We will still do that, but that's not initial action. We normally have to go through an investigative phase before we do that.
I'll give you that. So because everything's recorded now on CCTV footage, you probably do have, as you say, descriptions, but it's interesting you use the Bill of Rights there. Has there been some kind of directive from management to never provide descriptions to media? Because it seems like over the past 5 years, we are getting, as in media organisations, are getting fewer and fewer descriptions of serious offenders. I'm not aware of any direction given. I certainly haven't myself given any direction around that. But we definitely have to be mindful of how we may or may not be breaching the Privacy Act. And we also have to be conscious of, that if it's serious offending and we make an apprehension and then we're ending up in a trial, months later, we have to be conscious that we're, giving people a fair trial with our evidence that we've gathered. So, I'm not saying we don't do it, because I know we do, but we have to have a process we go before we do that. That certainly isn't the first option unless it's extremely serious and we've exhausted our inquiries early. These youth offenders, perhaps alarming many members of the public, not only did they attempt to rob people last night and allegedly run people over, but they stole or dog kidnapped, if you like, a dog from Wigram. Is that correct? But luckily the dog has been found safe.
It's actually not quite correct. I'm not sure if we passed that information on correctly early this morning or not, but I've had that verified. So the dog wasn't stolen. The dog actually ran away when the offence occurred. And as you say, the dog's been located, thankfully uninjured.
Well, that's good news. Final question, Superintendent. Really appreciate your time, by the way. Do you feel like Canterbury Police, have you got enough officers on duty at night? Are there resourcing issues? Have you got enough resources to deal with this perceived increase of youth crime?
I guess the short answer is we could always do with more resources. But having said that, we do roster additional staffing on over what we call peak demand periods. So, for example, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, we have other teams that work later and boost the numbers of our frontline, what we call our public safety team or PST. So we do that. But, in terms of the youth offending, we have dedicated teams that are focused on, the serious youth offending. But in this case that we've had last night, we've just boosted that team up by some additional detectives just with the nature of the offending and the seriousness. So we do have some tweaks to put additional staff in when we do see this. And I don't want to preempt that this is the same people we dealt with 6 weeks ago, but we did get on to that 6 weeks ago relatively quickly. We got a team together and we got them apprehended and dealt with, reasonably quickly. So I am confident that we can move our resources around when we need to have this as a focus. But I guess the bigger picture we need to think about as a community is how can we actually stop this offending. We can do one thing, which is apprehend and investigate, which we do. But, there's other agencies and wider families that can be assisting with us. So that's the bigger issue that we've got to try and grapple with as a community.
Well, I wish you well in your endeavours to stop these offenders. Superintendent, Canterbury Police Metro Commander Lane Todd, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.